Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Design for the Times. I'm your host, Richard Christopher Scuderi. Well, I'm very happy to have my doctor in studio because when I was walking through studio, I smelled burnt toast. I guess somebody's making a sandwich, and I thought, uh-oh, hope that burnt toast smell is really burnt toast. So this is a dear friend of mine, my doctor, Dr. Frank Mazzarella.
Hello.
And we're talking about something very, very dear to my heart. Now, you know, Design for the Times is a show about all about interior design. And each time we meet, I bring you different people that work with me, that are subs of mine, that people that work in the trenches with me, renovating homes. And we bring what we're working on, the projects I'm working on to you, and how to do them. So that's a lot of fun. But there's another side to me, and I have a very strong passion about good mental health. And in May of 2017, I wrote my first book called The Lonely Boy, and I've been on a book tour with it up until pandemic. And it's all about my personal struggle with anxiety and depression through my life and how to get through. Dr. Mazzarella and I had not known each other, but I think you could tell the story. I think it was at Amazon. So I don't know how you got onto the book, that you wound up reading the book and then reached out to me.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't I let you tell your side of the story?
Yeah, it was, Amazon will tell you about books that are available on Kindle. And I've always, I'm an internist by training, but I did want to be a psychiatrist for a while. So, and I think when you're an internist, you're always being a psychiatrist with your patients. And it just seemed very interesting. And the concept of the book was interesting, so I read it and contacted Rich, and that's how we got to know each other.
You know, and it was really quite nice when we connected, because when your words affect somebody so much so that there's activity because of that, it is pretty powerful, and it made me very happy that I made a connection. You know, shortly after I wrote this book, and this isn't a rah-rah for the book, this is bigger than that. This is more of a movement or of a passion of mine to help people have better mental health. And that's what we call the seminars that I do, which are, everything is free. This is not about monetizing anything. This is just about opening up about mental health. Wouldn't you say, as a doctor, Frank, an internist, and then your executive position you have now in the hospital, that mental health and physical health, there really is a correlation, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. You cannot have one without the other. The unfortunate part is that there's still such a stigma to good mental health that it's amazing that we are in the midst of 2022, and
this is still out there.
And yeah, the attitude is still the same. If you have diabetes and you have to give yourself a shot of insulin several times a day, no one even thinks about it.
Right, they don't shun you.
Nope.
They don't say you can't qualify to be a pilot or in the military.
Yeah.
Right,
Yet
exactly.
if you now self-disclose that you have a problem with depression, or you have a personality disorder, or you are bipolar, even though you can be very well controlled with medication, the same as you would be with any physical illness, there's definitely a double standard.
Well, you're perceived as damaged,
Yes.
Which is very, very wrong.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happened after I met Frank is that he felt very strongly, and feels very strongly, about good mental health and promoting good mental health and starting a conversation. So through the powers that be, Frank gave me some support, and I did meet some big people in television and media, and really grew. I started 3 weeks in, from a first-time author, I got a phone call from Barnes & Noble, and they decided to put me on a book tour, which was amazing, and shelved the first-time author next to Tony Robbins in the self-help aisle, which was really wonderful. Again, this isn't about me. This is about the importance of mental health. And then Frank sent out some books and had some connections. And then we started to do television. And let's go into some of the things. Actually, I should probably have ended with this. One of the reasons actually that we're doing this today is that I was asked to write a sequel, the continuing story, which is called The Enlightened Man. And we're just about to start taking pre-orders on that book, which is going to be published through Amazon or my website, which I'll give you during the broadcast here. The Enlightened Man is the continued journey forward, because our life is not set. It's not, you have a mental health issue, it's there and then it's not there. Our life goes on and challenges happen and things change. So this is sort of the last 4 years. And this is my website if you want to get my book. My original book is called The Lonely Boy. And that's my growing up until about age, I think, 50. And you can order it online. And if you order it at thelonelyboy.com, I hand sign it. So you can let me know who you want that made out to, and I definitely hand sign that. Now here's a little short thing that I thought was terrific and sort of basic. And I'll let you read it because you have glasses on if you can read it here. And it's just some tips, what we do when we do our meetings. And this is just some ways to maintain good mental health. Now, my eyes aren't as good as yours. Do you think you can read that?
No, probably not. It's
Oh,
like
that's
an eye
okay.
chart.
We need a young person in the room. The first one is getting enough sleep. And I find for me is that it really makes a difference if I'm not tired. When I'm tired, if I have any sort of tendency towards something not being right with me, it's affected more by the fatigue. Don't you think?
Sure.
Being well rested is a part of good health.
If you wake up in the morning and you're tired, it's already a strike against you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Number 2 is eating clean and exercising. And there are studies that suggest how much sugar affects your mental health and caffeine, and really eating a cleaner life. And then there is some studies that dark leafy green vegetables help with depression. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that as far as maybe nutrition. Exercise, without a doubt, helps anxiety and depression.
Because it's very good for your
Pheromones, it's good for your endorphins.
Sure.
So, all of those things, the body has a great way of compensating. And these things all help you with, getting yourself, connected in the right direction. The whole thing too, like as far as like the foods, the processed foods, those are definitely not good for you on a lot of different levels.
Sure, absolutely. Number 3 is taking care of basic physical and emotional needs and addressing them. And that's why they're doing this. In fact, I'm now going to go, now that we're not through COVID, doctor, are we? But it's more maintained, so I'm going back out there. And what I do is with a group of mental health professionals and doctors is I go out to the public in different venues and just start an open conversation. And it is wonderful. It is always a different venue. It's always a different, random selection of people that are brave enough to talk, and you hear people's stories. And I think the one thing that happens when you go to these sessions called A Conversation on Good Mental Health is that you hear other people's problems and their burdens and what they're living with. We never know what somebody's living with when we meet them.
Yeah. And to your point, with COVID, if COVID did anything, it brought out the disparity that we had in health, as far as not only just for patients that had COVID, but also just for the mental health aspects of living in a pandemic and a lockdown. And all the different aspects that you saw, for instance, with the elderly population, the ones that were doing okay and now suddenly were locked down, and you saw them spiral into more of a dementia than they had before. The young people, the kids, the young kids who spent 2 years learning at home as opposed to being in school and socialized with their friends. So there's a lot of things that we're going to be studying this for years and years and years, because it's an entire generation that got affected, plus our generations as well.
It's very timely because the next one on the list is staying connected socially. And really I'm seeing and hearing that the statistics of people since COVID with mental illness is off the charts.
Yeah.
And that directly was affected by, I think, that lack of staying connected. And physicality and communication and spending time together, the importance for your physical health of not having that.
And not only that, but people that were like healthcare workers that were on the front line. Yes, they were definitely.
And you were there,
yeah.
Frank, on the front line.
Yeah, they definitely. But and it was a. I don't know. It's kind of like it was a situation that I don't think I could ever explain. If you were there, and those of us that were actually there, seeing people that didn't even resemble human beings, dying by themselves without the benefit of their families around.
It was literally cruel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
From the isolation.
It was,
Yeah.
and having to kind of like piece together a family for these people, when they were dying, even though we relied on FaceTime, but they weren't really with their families. And they talk about PTSD, but I don't even think it was PTSD now. I think we're suffering the results of it without it being really too much post what it was, because it is still going on. Our hospitals still have COVID patients. We're still, seeing the breakthrough cases. Luckily, the severity is not what it was, but it's still there.
The next one on the list happens to do with taking inventory of our own mental health, stopping to think where you are, what you've been through, and processing what's important in life. Do you ever get involved in a situation where it's just taking up all your thoughts and times? Say to yourself, what is this going to mean to me in 3 months? What is this going to mean to me in 5 years? And being able to prioritize and let things go. And that's not an easy thing to do, but that makes a big, big difference, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's the same as don't sweat the small stuff.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, we all say it, but we don't. And
you have to practice
Yeah,
that.
you do. You have to practice it because it's something that comes out real easy, and it may work for a few days, and then you start falling back into your old ways.
Right. Very easy to get caught up in the physical world. And finally, managing stressors in life. And that's also something that we really have to work on. Sometimes we thrive on adrenaline and dealing in a different level. But that's not really good for us all the time. We have that for when we need it for crisis situations, but you want to evaluate the people in your life and the circumstances in your life that are not physically good for you.
Yeah.
And you may want to consider moving away from those things.
Sometimes, yeah, and giving yourself some downtime from everything that you do. You can't be on
Right,
all
the time. Exactly.
You can't be, because then you're like a battery and the battery wears down.
Absolutely. So I'm going to show you. So this is when we've been since 2017 on the book tour. I did other sites besides Barnes & Noble. This was one of the early Barnes & Noble events that I did, which was quite wonderful. Yes, I do a signing. I want people to know you don't have to buy a book. You don't have to buy anything. But we do some signing at the end. But it really is more of a conversation. I have a licensed clinical counselor. I have a medical doctor. Dr. Mazzarella has been on several boards that I've been on. We have a wonderful lady, Myra Burley, that does meditation and does a meditation. I have a lovely lady, Gail, who does yoga. And we talk about, and then depending upon the venue, different other people. But we basically make it sort of, I think, very user-friendly if you're having issues in life to talk about it. And when you talk about it in a public venue like that, it's actually a release. It's a release to talk about some of those things. I also host a monthly meeting at the Clinton Library. We're a little bit on hiatus. COVID kind of took a whopper. We did it outside for a while.
But actually, and I think wasn't the last one, it was the one before that when Rich had coverage by Fox 5.
I think maybe we have a picture or a video of that. So
And
we'll
that was really very, very good.
This was another Barnes & Noble location called A Conversation on Good Mental Health. This is The Lonely Boy when I saw it on the bookshelves of Barnes & Noble. I have to tell you, folks, if you have an interest in writing, this is sort of a sidebar. I went through a very difficult part in my own life, a journey after my father had a massive stroke, and I had brain surgery, I had a massive brain tumor, and was blind temporarily. That I had a lot of downtime, and I used that time to journal. not thinking my words would turn into a book that other people would pick up and actually read. But that took about 4 years for me to write my first book called The Lonely Boy There. And I really couldn't imagine that anybody else would want to necessarily hear my story. But my story is more of a universal story, and I think people can get something out of it. So in 3 weeks when it sold out and the people at Barnes & Noble said, we want to represent you and we're going to shelve you, I couldn't believe it. And there I was in the personal growth aisle next to Tony Robbins, and I thought, you know what, that's not just about me. That's a learning experience, that if you have something in your heart or you're passionate about whatever it is, whether it be physical health, mental health, whatever, photography, it doesn't matter what it was, follow your passion. The success will come if you follow your passion.
I think what is good about your book is that it's good for all ages,
right?
Because it starts out with you questioning, things going on when you were a little boy,
right?
And I mean, this is not just something you came to like an epiphany when you were 30,
right?
So you're following. So there's something for everybody at some stage of their life.
Well, it's anxiety and depression as a memoir, and the reason for the memoir is to try to reach people at different stages. And one of the nicest compliments that I had gotten is from a lovely lady in Maplewood. And she said, and I didn't know she had even knew the book was out. And she said, I want to thank you. And I thought, well, I'm working on her house. I guess she liked what I did. And she goes, no, I want to thank you because I have a 7th grader, and you wrote in your book that I picked up at local Words in Maplewood about being in 7th grade and what your mind was at. And she says, I have a son who's in 7th grade, and where his mind is at, and level of maturity and how he processes things and his depression. So that you're very right in that point, that it's not all about being where we are, but where we've come from. Because if you don't deal with those things, they're still with you, right? Haven't you had experiences in your life that are with you still to this day, and you can recall them?
Yes, can remember things very, very clearly from earlier in my life, of course.
This is a big one. I hate to see myself, but I will put it on. That this is one I did at Menlo Park at one of the flagship stores. This is one of the sessions that we did, which I had a whole panel, which you can't see there. And we all talked about how we can all improve our life, our happiness, and mental health. It's a double click. Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for coming, and welcome to a conversation on good mental health. My name is Richard Christopher Scuderi, and 2 years ago, pretty much to the day, I wrote my first book, much to my own surprise. About 10 years ago, on a fluke, I went to a psychic, and she came in the room and she looked at me and she goes, "You're going to write a book one day." And I'm like, oh, forget it. I want my money back. I was about to walk out of the room. And she said, this book is going to do something. It's not going to just stop. You're going to write a book and you're going to be able to help people and change their lives. And somehow, in some weird, crazy way, that kind of happened. I was going through a lot of psychological and personal problems in my life, and I decided to journal at night because I wasn't able to sleep. So I began to journal, and over a period of 4 years, that journal kind of turned into a book. So just as a fluke, I sent it to a couple of publishers, and every single publisher I sent it to, there we go. Every single publisher I sent it to gave me an offer. I had 10 offer packets. And I don't think it's because I was especially good. I think really being a little bit brave and going into your own toolbox and sharing some of things that are uncomfortable made people more comfortable in talking about it.
Because they realize they're not alone.
Right, and they don't carry that dark stuff which gives you tumors and makes you sick. And I think that's very much a part of it. But what started to happen to me was people started contacting me over the, people called on the telephone, people text me, emails, letters. I actually got a letter, believe it or not, from prison, from a family. Someone saw the book and they sent it to their son that was in prison to get his act together. And I got a nice thank you letter from him. Because you don't know what you put out there. It can come back to you, and sometimes very powerful in positive ways. So I started to realize beyond these talks that I was doing and the book tour that I needed to offer myself out to the community. So I started the Depression and Anxiety Support Group of Hunterdon, and we meet once a month at the Clinton Library. We've been a little bit inconsistent this year with COVID and some of the restrictions, but it's a free resource for people with issues of anxiety and depression to meet. There is, again, a licensed clinical counselor, a medical doctor, and other professionals, and I sort of lead the group just on a conversation. We usually have a topic. It's a safe space, and it's a great way to get help.
Yeah.
If you'd ever like to join our group, my phone number is 908-884-0770, and it's the Depression and Anxiety Support Group of Hunterdon County. Some of the things we were talking about, and I wanted to thank Dr. Dr. Mazzarella, because one of the programs that we were both on, actually, was Steve Adebado's Lessons in Leadership, where we talked about the importance of good mental health. And I thank you again, Frank, for spreading the word and trying to put some good in the world, right? We see so much negativity. I want to get your take on this, because the school shootings are so painful. I almost don't want to talk about them, but the school shootings are so painful and so outrageous and so consistent, and shootings in general are so much so. I am an anti-gun person, so I will admit that. But I think besides being the frequency of guns and these terrible guns that shouldn't be on the market, that you should be arrested if you have one, is the balance of the mental health. A mentally balanced person is not going to go to school and shoot children. And I think we have to really do a better job early on in the school years. And just like you have a physical evaluation on a yearly basis in the schools, starting in kindergarten, having a mental health screening. What do you think about that?
I think it's a very good idea. I think that, but again, we've got to remove the stigma. Mm-hmm. That if there is something that you see that is not right and you feel like you need to help somebody, that it's not going to get buried. You're not going to be, the parents aren't going to be insulted.
Nip it in the bud.
Exactly.
Make the parents aware of it. All these type of things, because the commonality of all these events, the shootings for schools, now forgive me if I'm wrong, all boys, all of a very young age, and all were isolated.
Yeah.
So there's a continuity there, and I think if that was observed, there's help out there.
Yeah.
This is the piece, quickly, this is the piece on, I think we'll go back. This is the last one. This was the piece they did on Fox 5.
Visited a local support group in Clinton, New Jersey, where participants showed how the program has helped them get through the last year.
I want to focus the rest of my life on helping stop the stigma of anxiety and depression.
Richard Scuderi's mission was always meaningful, but it's even more important now as millions of people cope with mental health issues brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so once a month, Scuderi leads a conversation about it at the Hunterdon County Library in Clinton, New Jersey, joined by a doctor and a licensed professional counselor.
My practice has really gotten much larger as a consequence, because more people are struggling with depression and anxiety and need somewhere to go to and places to talk. I don't think there's enough therapists right now to handle the mental health fallout from the pandemic.
Scuderi launched the support group several years ago after publishing a self-help book called The Lonely Boy, based on
So, I think it was our last one there. So, I know we've taken a little bit of a turn today, but I am, again, so passionate about mental health, particularly in current day in 2022, when there's so many things going on. COVID and the war that's going on, and the gun violence and the criminality that's going on. It is I think it's we've lived through many troubling times. I find this the most troubling. What about you?
I think it's because it's a coalescence of so many different factors. A pandemic, people reacting to it with post-traumatic stress disorder, people being isolated, and for want of a better expression, troubled thoughts festering. And the availabiliability of assault weapons, which makes no sense to me at all.
Absolutely.
And just it's just like in a very, very uncertain times. Add to that a war going on in Ukraine. You have gas prices which have been higher than anyone's ever remembered in their lifetime.
How about food
prices? I mean, how do families put food on the table for their
just basic human needs,
and
it's a lot.
Do you buy your medicine or do you buy food? So there's a lot of trauma and stress facing everyone. No one's really like off the hook with this.
It's absolutely so true. It's a lot of things coming at us at the same time, and I think people are less hopeful. So I think the commonality amongst us is that we're all on the same planet at the same time. We are all pretty much in the same journey, maybe different years or levels of our journey, but there's a commonality there of a sense of hopelessness right now. And that's why I think more important is that we really need to work together. We really need to lose the prejudices and the hate that's in the world. And I do believe a change in our own human behavior will change the quality of life on the earth. I know that sounds sort of Pollyanna and sort of simplistic,
Well, it's like
but I think the challenge of just taking that first step is very important. I think if we change our behavior, the world will get better. I do believe that. Do you?
Yeah, no, I do. I agree. I think that may be like the 40,000 foot look down, but it's got to start somewhere.
It has to start with a single step.
And I think that the fact that we're socializing more, I think that's very good. I mean, it's great to see people out on the streets talking to each other, not masked. I mean, certainly if we have to wear masks again, we will, but it's just nice to see that we're getting that human touch back. There's a lot of work to be done.
This was COVID was a learning experience, and it was an opportunity for us to be better. Now let's work hard being better, communicating, doing random acts of kindness. The other day I went to pay for my coffee at Dunkin' Donuts. The person before me, a stranger, had paid for it. I love that, don't you?
Yeah.
Doesn't that make you want to do something nice? I know you would definitely do that, but that makes you want to do something nice for somebody else.
It does, because it's unexpected. It's a random act of kindness.
And it really, something that costs somebody maybe $3, I would say $50 because coffee's expensive now, but something that $3 really changed the rest of my day that day. We're getting down to our last couple of minutes. I want to thank Dr. Frank Mazzarella of Clara Moss Hospital for his dedication to this topic, which is all volunteer time that he's done on promoting good mental health. And I want to thank you for listening to our program today. Be good to people.